Right, it's Monday, the 9th of September, and we're doing an interview for Stogursey Oral History Project. I'm Teresa Miller, and I've come to Williton to talk to Jill. Would you like to introduce yourself, Jill, please?
Yes, my name is Jill Summerhays. I now live in Williton, and I lived in Stogursey for 24 years.
So you were born in Stogursey?
Yes.
What year was
1940.
1940?
Yes.
What can you remember of Stogursey? What your first memory of Stogursey?
I think it was motorbikes. I think there used to be an army camp somewhere behind Paddens, which was where I lived. And I think there was an army camp there somewhere, and I remember motorbikes going up the road. That would have been quite early. I can't remember when the Americans were in the war, but it would have been quite early.
So lots of noises then?
Yes.
As well as...
Yes. Yes, because it was very quiet other than that. I remember as a child, if we heard a car, we all dashed out to have a look, because you had so few.
Did your family have a car?
Not until about 54, I should think. And it was second hand, and I remember being disappointed because it was square and not round. Silly things you think of. We used the bus if we wanted to go anywhere. There was a lady in the butcher's shop. She would often arrange trips, which I remember going to the pantomime, Western, I suspect, as a small child.
So that would have been a special event?
Yes.
To go out to the village?
Yes, to go out. Yes, it would. Although, having said that, when I went to school in Bridgewater at 11, but before that I used to go twice a week for medical reasons. I had to have sun ray treatment, whatever that was. And Mum used to take me on the bus twice a week, which was quite a lot for her, really, when you think about it.
That would have been before the new road as well?
Yes, oh yes. Oh, I can remember that being built.
Can you?
Because I was going to school from 11, I think, and then I worked in Bridgewater afterwards, and we used to, the bus, go on the bus, and sometimes the bus driver and the workers used to get into arguments because they'd have their digger in the way or of some equipment, and he had to wait, and of course he had a timetable, but worked out quite well, really.
Yes, because I suppose before the new road you'd have gone round all the villages. Yes. We always, coming home on one night a week, that was when I was working, we used to go round Stolford first, so it took, I was the last one off, of course, living at Paddens, and sometimes if the bus driver was very kind, they would stop at the bottom of the hill for me just to run down the road, whereas normally you had to walk from the village. But they were very good. If Mr. Haybill was on, you got home a lot quicker because he drove a lot faster. Well, going back to Paddens,
Yeah.
what was it like as a child? If you walked in the front door, what did you see? What did you have?
The stairs, right in front of you, and there was a room on the right, a biggish room, and a room on the left. I liked the one on the left best because that was the smaller of the two. It was actually quite a big house, really. And then there was like a cubby hole under the stairs and a pantry. To the other side of the stairs there was what we called the kitchen, where we ate our meals. There was a black range in there originally. After that there was like a Rayburn, only it wasn't a Rayburn. And then there was what we always called the back kitchen, where the cooking originally we had a gas cooker. Oh no, not a gas one. Well, we did have a gas one, but before that we had an oil green with big glass bottle type shapes that turned upside down, and I think was some sort of drip feed with oil.
It's like paraffin or...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we had very modern, we had gas. And we also had gas lighting downstairs then.
Would that have been mains gas?
No, it was Cala gas.
Oh, right.
From one of the big round cylinder things. Upstairs we had candles. But yes, we had it. We thought it was wonderful, this Cala gas. But we also had Tilly lamps, because Dad, there was no electricity up in the farm, or no gas up there. So Dad used to use Tilly lamps because the buildings were quite a way away from the actual farmhouse. So we always had those. What else? Upstairs there were 3 bedrooms, 2 in the front and 1 at the back, and a big bathroom, separate loo, indoor loo.
Water then?
Yes. And the water was heated from the stove downstairs. The airing cupboard was downstairs and had a big tank in the side of the kitchen.
So, in your house, who else was living there?
My mother and father, and my sister, who's younger than I am. But I do remember, it must have been after the war, we had evacuees.
Did you?
Yes, a Mr. and Mrs. Webb. We saw very little of them.
And they stayed with you in
and
Paddens?
they had the big front room. I think she must have cooked and everything in that room. And they had a bedroom upstairs. Because I remember after they went, as a child, I helped Mum peel the wallpaper off the walls.
So would your parents have offered Paddens as a direct to
I don't know.
evacuees, or would you have been asked to have had them?
I don't know. It was a rented farm. It wasn't our own. I think it belonged to Eton College. I'm not sure, but I think it did.
So your father's a tenant farmer?
Yes, yes. Well, my grandparents were there. Well, not my grandfather, because he died. I don't ever remember him, but vaguely remember my grandmother as an old lady in bed.
At Paddens?
Yes.
And that was your father's mother?
No, my mother's
Your mother's mother?
Yes. And they had, I don't know how many children there. Mum had 6 brothers and sisters, I think. So they were, I mean, some of them were a lot older than, because Mum was not the youngest, but the next youngest. So 1 or 2 of them had gone, but and there used to be a big shed out in the yard at the back, and I think the family used to sleep there quite a bit as well, because there was a lot of them. Long garden.
And what about your chores? Were you expected to help around the house and garden?
Not the garden. Nobody did. Well, didn't do much gardening. Well, yes, you had to do washing up and, laying the table. Nothing too strenuous. But oh yes, we were always expected to help. Cooking. Learnt to cook. Mum told us. Dad always used to say he had a bit of a raw deal, really, because he was experimented on by 3 women. Because Mum hadn't cooked. She had prepared. She'd always been allowed to prepare everything, but not to actually cook it. But actually, she's a very good cook. So she always said, "Well, no, you will learn to cook." So both my sister and I, she taught us to cook.
Good. And I bet you didn't have an automatic washing machine.
No, we had to wash up in the big sink, with the big draining board, wooden draining board. I hated washing up. Oh, and the other thing I remember we had in that back kitchen was a boiler with a fire underneath for wash day.
Right.
And an old mangle. Mum used to, and a blue bag used to go in the water.
What was the blue bag?
It was always a little, I don't know what it is, but it was a little square of blue block, and you put it in a little bit of sheet, and you tied it up, and you put it in the water that you swilled the clothes in, and it kept them white.
So you had to help with that?
Oh yes, we had to. Yes,
you
either fed the ringer but you didn't often,
And was there one day a week put aside for that?
Oh yes, that was Mondays. Always washed on Monday. But Mum was lucky; she did have help indoors, and that was Mrs. Buller, who used to live in Stogursey. Lovely lady she was. She came on Mondays and Thursdays, so she probably helped with the washing.
And what about the farm? Were you ever expected, or did you help with the farm?
No, I only helped really with the farm. When I was 20, I had TB, and I was in the sanatorium for 6 months, and then when I came home, I was home for 6 months, and I got bored. And I used to go and help Dad. I used to help wash the pans and the churns and all the rest of it. And I'd pick up the eggs and things. So I had some turkeys. Dad thought it would be a good idea if I had some turkeys, which I had to look after. Never again.
Why?
Well, they seem to die of the most unusual things. I mean, even one packed the wire. There must have been a brooder type thing, and they were underneath this to keep them warm because they were only little, and it packed the wire and died. So it was things like that. It always happened to me, And when we had a puppy, I remember, indoors, and we had half each, and my sister said my half was the front half, and it got all the washing off the line, we didn't keep that one long.
You obviously, from what you're saying, your dad had dairy herd?
Yes, cow, just a few cows,
right.
I don't know, half a dozen or so. No, oh yes, he had a few sheep.
And he was milking by hand?
Yes. Yes, and also he had a little unit thing that you could get. And I don't know whether that was when that was quite. But I didn't really have much to do with that. I didn't care for that much. My sister was better at that than I was.
Right. So presumably it would have been collected by a dairy, or did you sell it locally?
No. Oh, I think years ago Dad used to, because he used to go around with oh no, that was when he did potatoes. No, a lorry used to come and collect the churns once a day. I've forgotten that. And then Mum used to sell eggs, and then, as I say, when I was a bit older, we had these turkeys. Sold some to the butcher, and then the rest we plucked, and Dad killed. We all plucked, and it was a horrible job, and drew them and dressed them, and then that was that. Then they went out for Christmas. One year I remember Mum forgot to put our name in the book, and the one that was left was £19. Dad had to cut the back end off because we couldn't get it in the oven.
But I expect it tasted good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it did taste good.
Yeah. And what about school? You went to school?
I went to Stogursey School until I was 10, I expect, 10, 11. And my cousins lived at Priory Farm. Jean Warner, Eileen and Jack. And I can't remember. Jean's, well, she must be about 9 years older than me, I expect. But Jack's about 2 years older than me, and he used to come down and collect me. And then, in turn, we used to collect Mary Richards, who lived in the old vicarage just as you go up the hill from the church, and walk to school.
What year did you start at school?
Well, I must have started in 45, I expect. I don't actually remember starting school. I remember being very brave once and talking to Mr. Lane. He was the headmaster there when I was there. I can't remember if there was anybody in after him. The other one I remember is Mr. Williams.
So what recollections have you got of teachers? Good recollections?
Yes.
Not so good?
Yes, no, good. Oh, and Mrs. Hobbs was there as well. That's right. Because later, when I lived at Townsend Farm, her son was married to the daughter of the lady that lived opposite. I saw her, and I always remember her being as a very tall, upright lady. And when I saw her all those years later, she wasn't tall. It was good. Oh, and Mrs. Hurley was there as well. That's right. And when we used to have the school doctor.
Oh yeah, and how often did he come, or she?
Oh, I should think about once a year, no more. To give you a sort of check-up, they weighed you, and they also looked to see if you had nits in your hair and all this sort of thing. You're weighed and measured.
No.
Yeah,
Can you remember your favourite lessons or ones you didn't like?
No, not particularly. Funnily enough, I don't have that much recollection of school at Stogursey, because I left there when I was 10.
Was it still in the building there now, or did you have to go to
No, it was in that building.
Mm-hmm.
There were no outside buildings. And if you were poorly, because once I fell over and banged my head, and I had to go in and to the headmaster's sitting room and lie down on the settee until somebody came to collect me.
In his house?
Yes.
And he still lived in the schoolhouse at the time?
Yes. I don't remember his wife, yes. And then, of course, the opposite was the canteen.
On the opposite side of the road?
On the opposite side of the road, so we crossed the road in a crocodile effort every day to have our lunch. We had lovely lunches. They were cooked on the premises. Yeah.
Right. And what about the playground? Was that different?
No, it's exactly the same. And of course there was no wire. There was no fence.
So you had...
And I don't actually ever remember anybody falling out over.
No.
We used to often sit on the wall. So I've got a photograph of an aunt and uncle who used to come and stay, and they came up to the school one day, and we're talking to them over the wall. But there was no large fence like there is today. Yeah. The boys were one half, and the girls were the other.
In the playground? In
the playground. The same as the entrances. The boys had one entrance, and the girls had the other, cloakroom.
But in class you were mixed?
In class we were mixed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what about out of school? Obviously you had a big family in the village with cousins, but did you have other friends?
Yes, I had a friend in what we always call Back Street, and I don't think it's called Back Street now.
St Andrews Road.
That's it. I had a friend who lived there, and then I had Mary Richards, who lived, as I say, on the road, Church Road, I expect. And we used to... Oh, and Jill Fawn we used to ride bicycles when but we were a bit older then, because we would go to Shirton Bars on our bicycles, take a picnic, light a fire, and cook sausages, and mostly they were raw. But yeah, spend all day down there.
Through the summer?
Yes. Yeah. You might not see another soul. I remember going one evening with Dad and Mum, and we went in the water, and my sister and I had been totally amazed because Dad could swim. We'd never seen him in the water before, and he could swim. We couldn't understand how he could swim when we'd never known him go. We used to go outings. As I say, we'd go
With the family or through school? Or the village?
No, with the family, especially when we had the car. We used to meet. Mum had a brother who lived at Rushton. He had a butcher's shop, and they often came on a Sunday, and we used to go out for the day with them. One time we went to Portishead, or just outside of Portishead. There's a place called Weston in Godano, on the top road that goes along, where Mother was born. And so we went back there, I remember. Mistake. Because when Mother left at about 6 or 7, she remembered it with the gardens all perfect and what have you, and it wasn't like that when we went back. So I was very careful about going back. I did actually go back to Paddens. It took me a long time to make up my mind, but what's her name? Bolt. I can't remember her Christian name, but she was there. She said, "Oh, come on down," and she took me over. And actually, very little had changed. Very little. Oh, the other thing we had. Next to the back kitchen, there was a dairy, and it had, it was like a junk place for ages, and then got cleared out. And we had incubators to hatch our own chicks. Prior to that, Dad would perhaps go to Bridgewater Station and pick up day-old chicks, but we had these incubators. We had the eggs in big trays, and you had noughts on one side and crosses on the other, and they had to be turned every day. And then we had a much more modern incubator. I don't imagine it was new, but we had and you just flicked a little lever on the side, and it automatically turned the eggs. And then when it was time, we used to spend quite a lot of time looking through the piece of glass to see the chickens hatching out. That was always great fun. And then afterwards we had it to play in for a bit. Well, it was another thing we had. After Mum had scrubbed out a chicken house, quite often we were allowed to play in it until the hens were arrived or whatever and big enough to use it. So we used to play house in a chicken house. I played ball for hours, because down at Paddens the one wall has no windows that onto the road, and I would have a bat and ball there, hours on end. Skipping, we used to skip quite a bit. Yeah, and the other thing we had in the village was a film show. I think it was, I don't know whether it was once a month or once a fortnight. A gentleman, Mr. Howe, used to come from Cannington, with his cameras and all the paraphernalia. And it would be in the top room of the Ackland, which also was a schoolroom at some time after I left the school, because the Berrymans, they were Mrs. Berryman was a dressmaker, and Mum was very good at dressmaking, and Mrs. Berryman used to teach her a lot, and Mr. Berryman was a teacher at the school. And he taught there in the Ackland. They used to come down from the school every morning.
I
but
suppose
I
that's
left there.
because the
I expect it.
pupil numbers had grown.
Yes,
and, they needed extra
I think
space?
they wanted extra space.
Uh-huh.
I'm not too sure why, but I expect that must have been something like that.
But can you remember any of the films that you saw?
Oh,
there?
The Four Feathers. I mean, that was scary. And the Three Stooges. Oh, there were always two films and the news. And sometimes it would go wrong. And then somebody had to go down to the bar and get Mr. Howe to come up and
so
do
he-
what was necessary.
so
So
he
he'd
was-
set it all up, and
Right.
then he'd, and sometimes, occasionally, Dad would come, because you always knew, like, the following week or month what was going to be coming, and Mr. Howe used to come up in the middle of the film, and he would slide a pint of beer to Dad.
And so that was mostly over the children in the village?
No, I think it was for adults as well, because there were all sorts of films. I can remember The Four Feathers, and why I can remember that, I have no idea. But there was always something for the children. But mostly it was grown-up films. I think I saw Louise M. Alcott.
Little Women.
That's right. I think I saw that there. And the other thing, we used to go out of the village to go to ballet lessons on a Saturday morning.
Did you?
Yeah, I was 13 then.
Yeah.
I had to join ballet and go because they wouldn't let the others come back on the bus on their own. I mean, the parents. I mean, there was Beryl went. Who else?
Where
There were
did you
two
go for
others.
that?
We used to go to Cummich. They used to go by taxi in the morning, and for which I think we all paid £0.50 or something. Then we used to take us to Cummich, and it was in the shoe brush factory.
And who took the...
Mrs. Richardson, lovely lady, very tall, very erect, grey, and she taught us ballet. And we used to do little shows and things. Every Saturday morning we used to go there and come back on the bus. There was a bus that came back at 12 o'clock, I think. So we all piled on the bus. There were about 5 of us, I suppose, 4 or 5 of us. Can't remember who else used to go.
What about the village itself? So you went from Paddens and you went up to school. What,
Well, you see,
what was it like then? What else? What,
well, there were the shops.
Such
There
as?
was Mrs. Glover's up the top. It's not a shop now.
No.
Opposite the cross. Then there was the baker's. Mrs. Hole. Mr. and Mrs. Hole.
They were the bakers?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Salter's, the next shop down, with the post office.
All right.
What else was there? I think that was all the shops.
You still had the butchers then?
Oh yes, still the butchers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't think there was a shop on the end where that used to be a wool shop, didn't there? The other side of the garage. The garage was there. Yes, so you did your shopping in the village. You didn't go out of the village to do your shopping. Because I remember when, at Easter time, you had to order your hot cross buns. And Beryl there was chicken pox in the village, in the school, I suppose. And I'm itching, And I said, Mum, I'm itching. Will you have a look? Yes, but just pop up and get the hot cross buns. When I came back, she said, oh yes, you've got chicken pox. I got everything first. And Beryl had it worse, which was unfair, really.
Yeah, Beryl's your younger sister?
Yes, it was just the two of us. Yes, we actually had a very privileged childhood. We always knew we were loved and cared for. Mum made all our clothes. or most of them, except I remember once going to Bridgewater. There used to be a big department type store just by the bridge, on the upper side of the bridge, and we had new coats. And I remember Beryl saying, I can remember it as clear as anything, this is the first new coat I've ever had. Mum was furious. But she always had my cast-offs, you see. Our toys the same. Now, I had a doll's pram that was very ancient. I think it was about fourth hand when I had it. Beryl's was new. I remember being jealous about that. Don't ever remember being jealous of anything else, but I was miffed about the new doll's pram. We had bikes. There again, my cousin used to come and stay, and he said it was an ASP, all spare parts. Actually, I think he was probably right. So I learnt to ride a bike. What else did we have? Well, we used to go up in the wood. There used to be monk wood, but that's gone now, of course. Primroses, pick primroses. It doesn't sound. Oh, in night times we played games. We listened to the radio. There were programs for children. A children's hour, and we always listened to that. But we Ludo and those sort of ordinary games.
And what about Sundays? Did you?
Yeah, we went to church on Sundays. Always wore hats and coats. Hated hats. When we had these new coats, we had new hats to go with them. They were sort of velour things, like an upturned pudding basin with a brim. And we used to argue on a Sunday because Mum used to get cross. She said, I always know what day of the week it is because you two argue. But as a whole, really, we got on quite well because there's 4 years difference, which is quite a big difference,
yes.
Really. Yeah.
So you were obviously born before Hinkley Point came.
Yes.
Can you remember anything about the feelings or attitudes in the village when it was being proposed?
No, not really, because I went living down at Paddens. You weren't actually living in the village in the same way. I do remember the road causing problems when it was being built, because I was on the bus and it travelled and we got held up and things like that. But I don't remember people being cross or annoyed. There must have been, when you think about it. There must have been consternation, I should think, because of the influx of people.
Weren't there some caravans down near Paddens?
No.
No.
No, there was never any caravans down there. We're trying to think where there were any caravans. I think there were a few up at Farrington Hill. We used to go up to Farrington Hill because Mrs. Jones was a friend of Mum. Well, both Mrs. Joneses were friends of Mum's. And Auntie Mildred lived at Priory, so we went to Priory quite a bit. And we always went there Boxing Day, because the men used to go out shooting and things, and we always went there Boxing Day, because their house was so much bigger than ours, huge.
What sort of things did you do on Boxing Day?
We played games. And I remember Beryl leaning over once doing something and her hair caught fire. Dear consternation that was. But Irene was quick, put it out. Yes, we played games. And what sort of games? I've no idea.
You mentioned that you had had TB and went to sanatorium.
Yeah. How did they pick that up?
Yeah.
Mass radiography. And for that reason, I always, when there's any preventative medicine things going, I invariably go to those. Prevention's better than cure. I mean, when I was there were only 2 wards open upstairs. The ladies were upstairs and the men were down. And it closed a couple of years after, I expect. I grew up. And if I had my life again, I wouldn't change anything. No, it was an experience.
But you were a young adult when that happened?
I was 20. But I was a very young 20, really. You know, it was certainly an enlightening experience.
So presumably the sanatorium was for the area, so there'd been people...
Yes, there were people, Bridgewater, and further afield. I think there was one at, I'm not sure whether there was one at Taunton then, because Cheddar Road also had an isolation section, because later I developed it again. I got bronchitis and that caused a patch on my lung, so I was back in again, but I then went to Cheddar Road because the other one was shut. But I mean, I went in November or December or something and said, well, I'll go in, but can I come out for Christmas? So, you know, and I came home for Christmas, went back again till, that was the winter of 62, 3, the snow.
Yes.
Because I got no visitors. And down there, you had little chalets, 2 people in a chalet, and you walked outside along a concrete path that was covered over, but the front was open to go to the loo and the bathroom, and they had to dig us out. Every morning for about 2 or 3 months, they had to dig us out before we could go to the loo. Yeah, have a bath or whatever. Yeah, amazing. I remember waking up one morning in May, early May, looking out of the window and couldn't understand what was wrong. Then I realised a patch of snow that was under a hedge, a great big high hedge, had gone. And that was early May. Because I didn't have any visitors because they couldn't get through. But I was older then, I would have been 22, 23.
Any other, that winter is obviously, a lot of people remember that
Yeah.
one. Any other special events or
Well, we used to get
special
flooding.
occasions?
The brook used to come up. And in fact, sometimes the brook would come up and go down again and we didn't even know it'd been up. Because you'd go out to make a cup of tea or something and you'd see the... But if it was particularly bad, Auntie Mildred always used to ring up to see if we were all right. The things we did. Oh, badminton. Remember going to badminton? I think Dad joined badminton. Can't remember him playing. But I think he joined a badminton club. That would have been about, I would have been about 16, I suppose. Yeah. Well, I used to have music lessons with Mrs. Hurley.
In the village?
In the village, yes. Before I went in town to school, because she would come and she would teach me, and I used to ask her to, I hated it, I used to ask her to play, and she would play me all sorts of things. And then Mum used to come in and chat to her, and so the 20 minutes went quite quick.
Without you having
One
to...
and thrums. Yes, without me having to play. I never liked it. And I used to hate practicing. And Mum said, I can hear her now, she said, if you don't practice, she said, one day you will regret it. And she was so right. Because I wish I could play now, and I can't. I suspect if I had a piano and some music and really put my mind to it, I maybe would pick it up again. Because it's probably a bit like riding a bike.
What about any notable characters in the village? Can you remember anybody?
Oh, there used to be an old lady called Mrs. Webb who used to walk, I don't know where she lived, but she always looked very tattily dressed, and she wore a trilby hat, and she used to walk by. I assume she went up to the village for her shopping, and if we were outside, she always gave us a penny. And then there were the Perrys that had the blacksmith shop.
The blacksmith shop is in the village. Just
It's as you come down the hill and round the corner. Of course, they've redesigned all that. As you come round the corner, it was here. There's a house.
there's a couple of bungalows.
There now.
So you remember
And
the
it was there.
blacksmith?
And I remember the blacksmith, Mr. Perry, and his son Gordon. And they used to go every day in a pony and trap past the farm and up the road to milk a cow. They must have had a field up beyond our last one at the top. And Dad used to grow potatoes, and we all used to go and pick up these potatoes, and then he would deliver them all round the village in a pony and trap.
So you had a pony and trap?
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah, I can remember that. Yeah, I don't ever remember going it other than we had horses as well, because Dad used to plough with horses.
Did he?
Yes, and I remember riding on one once with my grandfather, but I hated it. Never liked horses.
So had your father been a Stogursey man?
No, he came from South Wales.
No.
He went to Usk College. He was a farmer's son, but he was a reluctant farmer, really. He wanted to do engineering, I think, but at that time there wasn't the jobs or the opportunities. So he went to Usk College and did courses there, and then needed somewhere to go to work. I don't know how he heard about my grandmother, but obviously my grandmother wanted somebody, because I'm not sure whether Grandfather Hill was dead then or not. But she was managing to run this farm, and Dad came to help and married Mum. And then they took it on, after Grandmother. I think she was a bit of a tartar, I don't know. Family. Oh no, I'm the one. My sister said to me the other day, we're the older generation now. She has different memories to mine.
Does she?
Yes. Yeah.
You obviously shared and talked about
Yes,
this.
we had done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what about as a teenager, young woman, courtship and...
joined the young farmers.
Oh, right.
I didn't want to. I really didn't want to go to young farmers. And Mum and Dad tried to persuade me, and I wouldn't go. And then I used to go on the bus to work with 2 or 3 other people. Di Small, I remember, who lived out at Sheraton. I can't remember the name of the farm. There's a big farm there. Just down from the blacksmith shop in the middle of the road, just down that way. And we used to go, that was the thing we used to do, parties, because Diana was the eldest and she had a sister, Jennifer, who was Beryl's age. So we went to parties if it was our birthdays. We always had a party on our birthday, which not a lot of kids did, you see. But we always had a party. Mine was always January, which was annoying, but Beryl's was always June. So it was a lovely time of the year,
So you went to Young Farmers? Then?
Yes, went to Young Farmers. Well, was one of the, I don't know whether it was Diana or the other girl. They said, look, come on, you must come. So I went. And that was it, really. I met Alan there. I would have been 15, 16. And that was that.
Easy as that?
Yeah, yeah. I did have another boyfriend. Went to the pictures with him in Bridgewater, but I didn't like him very much. decided I wouldn't go to the pictures the following week, and Dad made me ring him up and tell him I wasn't coming. Oh, we went down. That's another thing we did. We went dancing. I've got a friend. When I went to St Margaret's, I had two friends. One, which I'm friendly with now. One went to Canada. Well, I was a bridesmaid at her wedding. They got married and they went straight out to Canada. And she came back the other day and had a 50th celebrations, to which Alan and I went. I think we were the only people there other than family. And the other friend was Jerry, who lives in Bridgewater. I've been friends with her for years, and we're still friends now. In fact, I'm waiting for her to come back from on holiday, and we're going out for a meal. So we still keep in touch regularly.
These are your dancing friends as well?
Yes. I don't know whether Janet went dancing or not. I can't remember.
Where did you go dancing?
What was it called? It was down in West Street. Not West Street. Because West Street was up where the fair was. We used to go to the fair. But only allowed to stay till the 6 o'clock bus. Yes, what was the name of it? There used to be a dance hall down there, a cinema, on the left-hand side going down. Probably about...
Well, it's the Palace.
No, the Palace was up the other end.
Pinot.
Yes, no, it wasn't the Palace. Oh, Jerry'd remember. Her memory's better than mine. Well, we used to go in dancing in there. And we were taught ballroom dancing. Tuesday nights after work. We could only go Tuesdays because there was only a late bus on a Tuesday, back at 10 o'clock. So that was quite, really, I suppose, that was quite an innovation at 16. When you think about it, my parents were probably quite modern. I think it was Dad more than Mum, I have to say.
So all in all, happy memories of Stogursey?
Oh, yes, very happy memories. And whereas you can't sometimes remember what happened yesterday, or people's names, as you get older, your memories of those early years, I think, are far more acute than they were. This is why I wrote it down, and there's lots of things I haven't written down, things that have jogged my memory talking to you, because I think perhaps my grandchildren would maybe want to see it sometime.
That's right. I mean, little things. I mean, what sort of clothes did you wear?
Well, Mum made all our clothes. I remember we always had a new dress for Whit Sunday, and we always went to the fete Whit Sunday. And the other thing we did, Ascension Day, we went to church, and then there was an outing. We went to Weston, we went to the zoo, Bristol Zoo. So there was a lot that we did, really, when you think about it. And we went to pantomimes. At Nether Stowey we went as well. I don't know how we went there. We must have gone on a bus there, I suppose. And we did dancing.
And so the fete, was that Whit Sunday fete?
That was Whit Sunday fete in the vicarage garden. And then, because I used to go fairly regularly, I used to help Mrs. Miller, who lived at not Water Farm, what's the other one?
Dawley?
No, not Dawley. The other side of Bridgewater. The other side of Stogursey, on the Bridgewater Road.
Oh, right. Yeah.
She died, I couldn't remember going to visit her when she was very ill. In fact, funnily enough, we went down to the gravestone the other day. We called round that way because I wanted to check, you know how the letters fade on the graves, and I wanted to check that ours were all right. And I saw her grave, and she was one of the first people that were buried in the new churchyard. Oh, it's not very new now. Yes, because you can see right up to Priory now from there. Lovely view of Priory.
And what sort of things did you do at the fete?
Well, I used to help Mrs. Miller sell. I forget what she used to sell. Cakes, probably. That was another thing. There used to be a skittle week in the village, probably prior to the fete. Yes, it was. And my grandfather and grandmother were staying. Dad's parents.
From Wales?
Yes. And he gave us sixpence. Oh, and I had a friend staying as well. And he gave us sixpence to have a go on the skittles, because children were a bit cheaper and you went halfway up the board, of course. But unfortunately, oh, that's right, and I had to skittle off. That was it. On the Sunday, I suppose it was. I had to skittle off Sunday or Monday. But unfortunately, grandfather died in the night. And that was horrendous. Well, it was very horrendous for grandmother, never mind about the rest of us. And because that was the first person of my family that I can really remember having died. And Mum rang up Pam's mother to say, could you please have Pam back, because we had this problem. And she said, oh, bring the girls can come as well. So we were packed off. I always slightly resented it because I didn't go to his funeral, and he was a very, very special man, I have to say, and probably because he was the first one. And I remember going to church on the Sunday at Cannington, and Mr. and Mrs. Popham had gone away for the day, and it was just the older girls were there. And I don't know what happened at church, but Beryl and I came out and we're crying our eyes out. We're crying all the way down home. Oh dear. I always remember that.
And you had gone to Cannington to stay with your friends?
Yes, that's right. With I'd been before,
yes.
So it wasn't to say they were strangers to me.
No.
Beryl'd never been, but they were very good to us.
So you would have been, how old then?
13.
13.
Yeah, and I always remember the other thing was, when you went and stayed anywhere, you took, I took bacon. Mrs. Popham was quite, not offended exactly, but she was quite put out. She said, well, we'll put it back in the fridge. I mean, imagine, she had this huge fridge. And then you take it back when you go home.
Was that because you produced it on the farm?
Yes.
And it was a gift from the farm?
Because, yes, it must have been. Because Mum wouldn't have bought it to take, and we always kept a pig. Because remember the chitlins? Mother washing chitlins, soaking them in cold water and turning them inside out with a stick. So they were cleaned properly, and soaking in buckets of water and bowls of water for days, and then cooked. And I loved them. Very fatty. I did love them. So we always had a pig, and big hams hanging in the kitchen in muslin.
Right.
But never actually remember eating much of that.
Maybe special occasions?
Don't know. Don't remember. We had rabbit, of course. Dad used to catch rabbits. And there was always, you had most everything you wanted.
When you
Sweet ration we had.
Yes, I suppose it's after the war, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes,
Or
because I was allowed to have my sweet ration and take it with me to school, and I lost it at school, and one of the other girls found it and gave it back to me, And Dad made me buy her some sweets because she had found my sweet ration.
So it came with your name
It
on
came,
it?
yes, it did. It was like a half a page or a quarter of a page, and it had your name on. Yeah.
Right. And what was the allowance? What could you get with it?
I remember I used to get, I don't think that was on ration though, lemonade powder. But Mum wouldn't let us have lemonade powder. But sometimes she'd give us some money to get some sweets on the way up to us. Then we had something for sort of break time. And I used to have this lemonade powder. I used to eat it or share it with my friends. And ate it all before I got home. And of course the evidence was gone then. There was no orange finger or... Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And we always had 2 ounces of things, exactly the same.
Right.
And they came in those little pointed bags.
And which shop did you get that in?
Mrs. Salters. That's right, Mrs. Salters. And they had lots. You see them now. Where did I go the other day? And I saw all these sweets in big jars, and they were all lined up. These jars with these sweets in. Biscuits came in tins, and sometimes you could buy half a tin of broken biscuits. That was always a treat to have the broken one. And the other thing we used to have in winter were apples, Blenheim apples. Mum used to get from Mr. Frampton, who used to live in Lime Street. It's Lime Street, isn't it? Yes. Just where the new road is now, the new road that goes round the back. There was a big house there, and he had a big orchard at the back. And he had these Blenheim apples, and they used to be big apples like this, and we used to sit down round the fire, and Mum would peel 2 of these apples and split them up, and we all had some each. And that was a treat. Silly things.
No, they're really important memories.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes, I remember those. I never liked eggs much, and I never drank very much milk, hence my osteoporosis now, I suspect. I hated milk.
Mm. Which I suspect was a bit tricky if your dad was producing lots of good quality milk.
Yes, it was. But I didn't, no. I didn't,
No.
And we used to go to church every Sunday.
Just once, or?
Yes, just the once. Rita Cable. She used to live in the High Street. She used to come and collect me. And I remember refusing to go once. And I very rarely, well, I didn't refuse to do anything, but this particular time I did. And I remember Mum saying, well, if you don't go to church, you go to bed. And I went to bed, and Mum said I went to sleep as church was coming out. Didn't refuse to do anything again.
So you didn't then go with your family, you went with your
No,
friends?
it went, she collected us, and we went sometimes we used to go in the afternoon to Sunday school as well.
Was
But
that
no,
held
I
in
don't
the
remember.
church?
Yes, for a little while. Dad used to ring the bells, but I don't ever remember him going to church very often. A special harvest and things like that, and Christmas he would always go. And Mum would come with us occasionally, but she was usually cooking or busy, you know. But we were always had to go on Sunday mornings.
In your smart coats and
Yes,
hats?
that's right, and hats, those pudding basin hats. Dreadful things. Yeah.
Mm. Well, it's brilliant. I mean, there's just so many memories there.
Yes, there is.
Fascinating.
You don't
listening.
realise how many memories you've got till you
No.
start.
No. And I know you said on the phone that you've got some collected postcards as well of the village.
Yes. Do you want to look?
Yeah, that'd be lovely. I've just switched off for a minute. Okay, we're running again. So Jill, you were just telling me about Mr. Quick the cobbler.
Well, yes, we used to always get our Clark sandals from Mr. Quick. And you'd go in, the bell would ring, and he'd always shout to you, come on in. And we used to go in, down the end, and he would be sat on a little stool with his shoes and what have you, bits and pieces, and behind him was a mound of shoes, really quite high. I don't know whether he ever got to the bottom of them. You didn't leave them very long if you were having them repaired, I remember. Mum used to go up quite often. Yeah, but we always bought our sandals there.
And you were also saying that your parents moved out of Paddens.
Yes, and I don't know when that would have been. It would have been about 62, 63. And they moved up to the Fox and Hounds that was 2 houses then. And we stayed there for about 18 months, I suppose, 2 years maybe.
But it wasn't a pub then?
No, it wasn't a pub then. It belonged to my aunt. And I don't know whether they had it turned into 2 houses or it was 2 houses when they bought it. And we lived there for about 18 months, but that only had 2 bedrooms. So then we moved to one of the council houses in Lime Street, which was further to walk for the bus. But, of course, we always had the doctor came to Stogursey. Had a surgery in Mrs. Whitefield's house.
Now, which is Mrs. Whitefield's?
Mrs. Whitefield's. It's on the gravel, but on the opposite side. Got a porch.
Right.
And you used to sit in there and wait for the doctor to come.
And how often
turns.
did the doctor come?
I think he used to come twice a week. I'm not sure, but I think it used to be twice a week. But there also used to be a doctor who lived on the gravel. Dr. Archer. Now, I remember him when I was a very small child, because he used to come and see my grandmother. I would have been about 4, maybe, something like that. He was called Dr. Archer, I remember. I don't remember him ever coming to see us.
And what about your Sunday evenings? What did your family like to do?
In the summer, we always went for a walk. And we'd go various places, quite a long way really. And all the four of us, and my sister always used to want to go round Shirton and Burton, because Dad would stop in the Burton Inn and we would all sit outside, and Mum would have a lemonade and Beryl and I would have Tizer and Dad would have a pint. So Beryl always opted for that route, which was good.
But you said you weren't the only family out walking.
Oh no, you would meet lots of other people going for walks. I suppose it was one of the things families did as families. And we also used to go to Shirton bars and would walk. And one particular day, I remember, my mother was petrified of thunder and lightning. And when we were down there once, I think Eileen Warner was with us as well, it started to rain and thunder, so we had to hurry home. I wasn't very old. Beryl was a baby. Well, she probably was about 9 months, 10 months old, I suppose. So Mother took the pram. And what Mother didn't know was, and Dad came to meet us, and he discovered it, I had filled the bottom with stones, and it tipped up in the road, because it was a bit heavy one end by that time. Well, I got a row for that, I remember.
Not surprised.
That was mad. Yeah, I just thought of that. Yeah, I can remember it tipping up.
Yeah. Tipping the baby out into the road as well.
No, it didn't. I don't remember Beryl falling out, but.
Oh, it's wonderful. Superb memories.
Yes, I'm very lucky, really.
Yeah.
To be able to remember that much.
Yeah.
And I think, if my sister had been here as well, it would have triggered, which she would probably had a different take.
Yes. Perhaps you want to talk to her.
Yes, well, she lives in Plymouth.
Ah.
And at the moment she's in Cyprus, so,
Yeah.
not so easy.
Well, thank you anyway for sharing
No,
that. It's been
my
wonderful.
pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.